Hey there, welcome to LSAT Demon Daily. I'm Ben Olson, that's Nathan Fox. We're the founders of LSATdemon.com and our weekly podcast, Thinking LSAT. We have an email here from Morgan.
Says, hi, Ben and Nathan. I just got started with the Demon and I have noticed a lot of improvement in comparison to when I was using a larger test prep company. Thank you for all that you do. My question is regarding score variation. I have noticed that when I take single sections of tests, I have been pretty consistent, only missing about 3 per section. However, when I do a full length practice test, my scores can vary by so much. For example, I'll get a 172 one week and a 160 the next. Do you have any recommendations or advice on why this may be happening? I'm registered for the August LSAT and my goal is to be in the 170s, which I know I'm capable of, but it's very discouraging when my scores will suddenly drop so frequently. Thanks so much, Morgan.
I have 2 ideas, Morgan. First of all, variation is always going to happen. You get a 172 and then you get a lower score because that 172 is the result of variation itself and maybe not necessarily reflective of everything you're misunderstanding. You got lucky on some of those questions. But another thing I'm thinking here, and that is that when you're doing individual sections, I think you're much more likely to be focused on, hey, I need to do this now. I need to do this question now, and I need to do well on that question, which is just part of this section, which is then going to be over. When you start doing a full test, you might be treating that section differently because you're thinking, oh, I got to do all of this work. And so now your mind is kind of drifting away from what you need to do right now and thinking about the whole entire thing. And you just need to do what you do with those sections while you're doing a test. And that is to do one question at a time, one passage at a time, one section at a time, and then the test.
Yeah, and my guess is also that there is more variation in your section scores than you're really noticing. You're paying close attention to it when you calculate your official, LSAT score on the 120 to 180 scale. By the
Sure.
way, the scales are different from each other. So sometimes part of the variation can be because this was an easier test, so you scored lower on it, or this was a harder test, so you scored higher on it.
Mm,
Even given the exact same number of questions correct, you can score a few points higher or lower depending on the difficulty of the scale.
sure. Yeah.
But Morgan says, I have typically been pretty consistent, only missing about 3 per section. Well, there's a big difference between missing 2 and missing 4.
Yeah.
That's twice as many.
Especially if you do that in each section.
It's still about 3.
Yeah.
But, if you combine a bunch of -4s together, then maybe that's your 160. And if you combine a bunch of -2s together, then maybe there's your 172. Um, the most important thing I think that Morgan takes away, though, is that variance is actually your friend. Law schools only care about your highest score. So everybody wants consistency, but for one, it just doesn't happen. It's just not real. People can't actually get consistent at the LSAT until they start getting like perfect or close to perfect every single time.
Yeah.
The truth is, Morgan, your current ability is probably 166 plus or minus 6. So sometimes you're going to score 160 and sometimes you're going to score 172. And it's luck. It's the difficulty of the questions and the sections and the test. It's what you ate for breakfast that day. You're going to have good days. You're going to have bad days. Every athlete knows that some days they run faster. Some days they run slower. Some days they lift more. Some days they just can't. Some days you're going to score higher on your LSAT. Some days you're going to score lower. There's always going to be variance. But the good news is law schools only care about your highest score. So instead of pursuing consistency as if that's an attainable goal, you should ignore the variance and instead just focus more intently on the individual questions that you've missed that make up that score. Even at a 172 on your very best day, you're still missing questions. The questions that you're missing are offering you an opportunity to learn. And that's where you should focus your time and attention. And I know it's hard not to be distracted by the variance, but the variance actually doesn't hurt you at all. It's not a problem. It's not something that you should be concerned about. Instead, you should be concerned about the individual mistakes that you're making and learning as much as you can learn. You've still got plenty of room to improve and still have variance. Someday you'll be a 170 plus or minus 5. Maybe someday you'll be a 172 plus or minus 4. As you get closer and closer to 180, maybe the variance will narrow a little bit. But it's arguable whether that's actually good for you because, again, only your highest official score is going to count and you're allowed to take it 5 times. Anything more for Morgan?
No, thanks for writing in.
Email daily at lsatdemon.com if you'd like to ask us a question or share some LSAT or law school admissions news. Thanks for listening.